Hello, okay, now I'm ready.
Okay. So I'm really glad to have this opportunity to sit down and talk to you, because having been married to you for over 25 years and live with you and watch you work, I really enjoy seeing what happens behind the scenes, and nobody else gets to see that apart from your clients. And of course, that's usually confidential unless they give you permission to share.
Yeah.
So what I notice often is that kids come to you, sometimes adults, but mainly kids come to you, and their self-esteem is quite low. They have often anxiety, sometimes performance anxiety. They're struggling with their learning or their performance in behavior, sports, whatever the area is they've chosen to come, maybe all of them, mathematics. And they come in and they're sort of head down often. And after a few hours of working with you, they are fully changed in their behavior. They're already smiling. They're already feeling better about themselves. And that's just after a few hours. So after a program, I watch them leave the work environment and go out into the world with a head held high and feeling good about themselves, their mathematics, their English, all their goals that they set have been met.
I'm not gonna read.
Okay.
Once there was a unicorn.
High five!
And it's just so wonderful to see, and particularly the appreciations you get from parents, the little writings you get from the kids to say thank you. I think it must be wonderful to work transforming lives.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I'm a Davis facilitator.
Tell us what you love about your work.
I love working one-on-one. That's one of the things I love. Well, I also love presenting in a group, but this work is so rewarding because it's so immediate. Like you were saying, they come in, and sometimes within a day they are transformed. And a lot of the kids that come to us, they've been through one remedial intervention after another, and most of them just not working, otherwise they wouldn't be coming to us. So they often have kind of intervention fatigue, meaning they're reluctant to have more things done to them. But right from the start, they sense that this is different.
How do they sense that? What do you think they pick up?
The first point of contact is the assessment, and it's very different from any other assessment that they might have, because it's actually a guided self-assessment. It's not me as a professional assessing them and testing them. It's me finding out how they feel about themselves. And in that relationship, in that kind of first point of contact, we set the scene for how the program works. So it's a collaboration between me and the client. It's not me doing something to them. I am there to support them achieve their goals.
And that's a shift in role right from the beginning.
Yeah.
What is it you like about the one-on-one work?
I love giving a person full attention, and
You're very good at that.
yeah.
I'm laughing because when I have your attention, I love it. And when I can't get your attention because you're focused on something else, it's frustrating. But that hyper focus that you're capable of is what you use 7 hours a day for your client. And I think I'd love to be your client. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, so I just love work. It's like a detective work, what we're really finding is that we're finding the little kind of pockets of confusion, and then filling in those holes that are missing, those gaps in their understanding of life or learning. We're finding these holes and fill them in.
Can you give me an example of that?
And well, there might be confusion between B and D as a typical dyslexia confusion, and then we find that we have ways of finding those little pockets of confusion, and we know exactly how to, well, yeah, we know more or less how to clear up the confusion. If we don't, and that's the other thing that's fascinating about the work, then my job is to find the way to clear up the confusion. And so it's kind of detective work in finding the holes in their understanding, and then creative work in finding how to fill in the gaps.
Yes, because what we know is if there's one tiny piece of information, such as, let's say, if a child doesn't understand the difference between over and under, then they can't follow the instructions.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've got an example. For some reason my mind's blank right now, but I know you've worked with time, with, don't know, maybe you can help me out here, with different subjects where there's been absolute understanding from the person you're working with, but there's one tiny piece, as you say, missing.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember it. I'm sure it had something to do with telling the time and the earth. And I remember you going outside with a little ball and a torch and working with them. But there was one tiny thing they didn't understand. I don't know if you can remember that.
What we do is that we scan through the knowledge that needs to be there, and we search for gaps in their understanding. And when we find them, we fill that gap in. And when we're working with ADHD or maths, then there are certain concepts that we need to cover, and the most important one of those, or the one that takes the longest, is the concept of consequence. So, but another one is the concept of sequence. There are 5 different sequences, and one of those sequences is what we call an arbitrary sequence. That's like an agreed sequence. Like, how should things follow each other? And life is full of them. There can be arbitrary sequences in time, like in a restaurant you have a starter, then the main, and then the dessert. But there was this one boy who, when we were working on this idea of arbitrary sequence, he thought he knew what it was. And he said, yeah, I know what arbitrary means. It's the same as random. And I realized he had confusion there, because random and arbitrary, they're often used interchangeably as words, but the meaning is actually very importantly different. So in an arbitrary sequence or an arbitrary decision, there is right and wrong. You either do it as you are supposed to do, or you got it wrong. With random, there's no right and wrong. However it is how it is. And if we take, for example, lottery, where we get random sequence of numbers, there's a whole machine to create random sequence. And it's very different from arbitrary sequence, like the alphabet. And so, where it made a huge difference with this boy, he could have had a diagnosis of something called oppositional defiance disorder. He challenged his parents every decision. He was a very difficult child to manage. And once we had cleared up the difference between random and arbitrary, he suddenly realized that his parents' decisions and boundaries were not random. They were arbitrary. And when there's arbitrary, there's thought, there's care, there's time that's put into deciding what happens. With random, it's just like throwing dice and whatever happens. So if the parents' decisions were random, then his decision was equally valid as theirs. So he challenged them all. But when he realized they were not random, they were arbitrary, he started respecting their decisions, their boundaries, and his behavior completely changed.
You see, this is what I find so gift-giving. As Ron called it, the gift of dyslexia. Gift-giving is the idea that suddenly all the dynamics in the family changed. And it wasn't because one was wrong or one was right, it was because of misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And you know that I spent a lot of my life in misunderstanding because of my severity of dyslexia. And in the 1960s, nobody knew what dyslexia was in that way. So I went through the whole of my school life misunderstanding until I had the gift of meeting Ron. And then you met Ron. And then you became a Davis facilitator. So I really think it's valuable to hear how the program facilitates relationships and self-understanding.
What we tend to sell in terms of Davis programs is a dyslexia correction or attention mastery or maths mastery. But what we actually deliver tends to be much bigger than that. It tends to be much wider. So we actually deliver a new lease of life in many cases. And so the first thing that tends to shift in a client is self-esteem. They generally come in with a very low self-esteem. They know that they are struggling and they are not performing like their peers, but like everyone else, they do not know why. And they've been told that they don't try hard enough. They've been told that they're lazy. They've been try harder. But they know that most of the time they are trying much harder than anyone else around them.
Exactly. I had on every single school report, Andrea must learn to concentrate. My mother also had the same on her school report. It wasn't a possibility for me. I couldn't have learned how to concentrate.
You didn't know how to.
No.
And that's where Davis is unique. The first thing we do is to teach how to focus your attention, which we could call concentration. Concentration is different. Concentration is trying to force your attention and force it to stay, not lose your focus.
That's exactly what it felt like, and it was impossible.
Yeah.
And then the teachers would assume that I have a bad attitude, but I never had a bad attitude. I was just incapable of doing what they asked.
Yeah. So the Davis focusing method is very easy compared to concentration. And like I said, that's the first thing we teach. And then once that is in place, then it's very, very quick and easy to find the areas of confusion, because then the person loses their focus. And then clear up that confusion because they are able to refocus again and again.
So when I first worked with Ron and was able to focus after the program, I always read, so I was never completely illiterate. I did like reading, but I would read very slowly, maybe a book a year. And then I remember reading Elizabeth Jane Howard. You know, she's got the 4 or 5 books that are in a, what do you call that? A 4 or 5
series?
A series. And I don't know, I read about 1,000 pages in 2 weeks. I couldn't put the books down. So I could focus for the first time in my life.
And maintain your focus.
And maintain my focus. I was also able to migrate from one profession to the other, because for a long time I'd been an interior architect. I was a spatial visual thinker. I would, do my drawings for the builders, but I'd also draw on the walls and, really be able to see the finished concept right from the beginning. But as time wore on, I wanted to become a psychotherapist. I'd been training for some time, but I didn't have the ability to be able to hold eye contact like I'm doing with you now and really stay present. And so once I'd had the gift of being able to focus from Ron Davis, then I carried on with the course and was able to be practicing as a psychotherapist. So it was, for me, really life-changing.
Yeah.
I think it probably helped with you too, that I could focus on you.
Yeah. And I'm ADHD myself, and I found those concepts, the attention mastery program, was really important to me. Before the program, I used to be, well, I didn't do a client program as such, but part of our training is to be a client, and also when we're taking a client through the program, we go through these same concepts again and again and again and again. And before Davis, despite a huge amount of psychotherapy I had received, I just could not be on time for almost anything. I was too late. My relationship with time was really distorted, and I would lose track of time and not realizing how I was impacting my prospects, how I was impacting others, which is the constant consequence. And after the program, my life was totally transformed. It's very rare for me now to miss an appointment and be late. So that's completely changed my life.
And it's really changed our relationship, because we used to get into arguments about you being late for dinner or not being where you were going to be when you said you were going to be. And so it's really nice that I can completely rely on you now.
Yeah. And also in our relationship, the fact that we both we both understand the Davis principles, if you like, because we've both been exposed to the Davis program, we have a lot more empathy for each other and patience, tolerance, and you see, when you lose your focus, you speed up, and when I lose my focus, I slow down, and that could be a very precarious dynamic between people. You find me too slow, I find you too fast. And that's kind of a potential for a lot of conflict. But because we understand this about each other, we have a lot more patience and compassion for each other.
Yes, and what goes with that is that the speedy and the slow come up when we are too tired.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody listening to us talking now will hear the difference between my speed and yours, but it doesn't irritate us until we get too tired at night, and then we just know not to even talk things through, just go to bed.
Do please feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call. It costs nothing to have a chat. All my contact details are on my website, www.gifteddyslexic.com. We are licensed by the Davis Dyslexia Association International, and for more information on training and interventions globally, please visit our international website, www.dyslexia.com.